For example, I work with someone who came in and she wasn't actually very hidden about it. She just didn't know what to do with it. So she's like, I feel like I'm supposed to help 1 million children. I'm like, that's cool. Like, you're kind of a mid-level leader in a nonprofit that has nothing to do with kids right now. Like, but that was something that she was carrying, right? Fast forward 2 different jobs. She ends up, getting her first CEO position in an educational organization and then eventually running a charter school system that's trying to expand across the country and probably will end up helping 1 million children. So we couldn't have foreseen that.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Rexhen, and today's guest is LeeAnn Mallorie, the CEO of Guts and Grace Leadership and a trailblazer in helping female executives, innovators, and change makers expand their impact without burning out. Since 2006, LeeAnn has been coaching leaders and teams around the globe, combining executive coaching with body-based mindfulness practices that bridge the gap between the logical mind and the deeper wisdom of the soul. Through her Guts and Grace methodology, she equips purpose-driven women leaders to dismantle internalized barriers, sustain their energy, and lead with boldness, authenticity, and resilience. And it's a pleasure for me to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rexhen. It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming, Leah. And I wanted to ask you about your beginnings when it comes to Guts and Grace. I know it's been getting closer to 7 years now that you've started it, since 2019, and wanted to ask you, what inspired you to become a coach and then start your coaching business?
Well, actually, Guts and Grace started in 2014, and I started to build the methodology in 2010. So it's actually been quite a while that I've been on this path of Guts and Grace as a set of practices and also as a coaching program and coaching approach. Though funny enough, I actually started coaching in 2005 and 6 when I was working for another organization. And the truth is, I never actually aspired to be a coach. I started coaching young enough that I was looking for a job, but specifically at the time, I was really interested in cross-cultural leadership. And when I graduated from my graduate degree, I started to do some research on who was running firms that were doing cross-cultural leadership training. And around that time, in 2004, 2005, there actually weren't a whole lot of people doing that. Or if there were firms out there that were doing it, they were fairly small, or I would kind of outreach them and they would say, well, it looks like we're a big company, but it's actually just me and we don't have any business.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of got a taste of what was happening with people who were trying to build a particular kind of coaching business at that time. And through a referral from someone who was connected to my graduate school, got lucky to be hired into an entry-level position in a bigger firm that was doing transformational leadership coaching, not specifically intercultural in nature or cross-cultural in nature, but it was a pretty deep dive method for teaching people leadership, and that particular program had coaching as a component of what was offered to the leaders who came to work with us. So as a fairly young person or kind of intro level role on the team, at first I started doing 360 feedback interviews and doing something a bit like what you're doing here, right? Gathering data and asking people a lot of questions. And they found that I was good at that. And they said, well, do you want to learn to be a coach? That's the next rung on the ladder in our organization in terms of a role that you could play with our clientele. So I came into coaching through that invitation. And what I had been longing for when I left graduate school was really to make an impact on people, because I was more in the science and research domain before, which is partly why I came out into the workforce. And so I found that in coaching pretty quickly, I really could make, at least on one person's life and maybe the life of their team or the people around them, a pretty specific kind of impact that I really enjoyed doing. So I stuck with it all this time.
Cool. And so for those of them that are listening that might fit the profile of the people that you typically work with, how would you describe that ideal client profile? I know I mentioned some of this on the intro as well.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about women, I talked about leaders, innovators, but would you say that there's a certain industry? Is it only women? Does it only fit into that demographic, or is there other people that could fit into that profile? Do they have some common goals or other commonalities? How would you describe that?
If I had $1 for the number of times I've been asked this question over the course of my career in building Guts and Grace, I would be even more wealthy than I am. And, I say that it's like there's always this need and instigation by those who mentor us in the coaching industry to have a niche. And I would say my niche is very dialed in now. It's very precise, it's very clear, but it's also a little bit hard to explain. So essentially, I work with the women who are the ones situated inside of organizations typically who are a little bit different than the people in their organization who are probably culture builders and or disruptors or innovators in some way and maybe aren't getting full traction inside of that. And mostly when I know someone's a good fit for Guts and Grace, it's when they lean in when they hear Guts and Grace. They're like, wait, what is that? That sounds cool. I'm interested in that. Because often it's, a particular archetype of woman leader who maybe has learned to wield masculine strengths and superpowers to get by in a fairly masculine workplace, but also has this other side that she's not necessarily talking about at work. Maybe she also is a yoga teacher. Maybe she has a mindfulness practice. Maybe she loves to dance. Maybe she fill in the blank, really. Maybe she has a deep spiritual practice or she's a very religious woman, for example, but it's not so much welcome at work. And what I found is that often there's a time when a woman will hit a leadership ceiling or a ceiling in terms of their ability to climb a ladder because they've left those parts of themselves out of the workplace and they're actually their strongest strengths or their deepest gifts. But there's no roadmap. There's no handbook of how do I translate my spiritual practice or how do I translate my yoga into my leadership. And so there's really a need for someone who has that particular build to learn how to wield that and to let go of the things that are in the way of them wielding that. And that's actually what Guts and Grace is designed to help women do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true that it can only serve women, but I like to work with groups of women because we get in different conversations than we would in a mixed gender group. Although I do have programs that are based on the methodology of Guts and Grace that we do with mixed gendered groups. I've come to find that there's a real unlock that happens with women, which is why I've built it that way.
It makes sense, actually. And so for the women that are listening to this that fit that profile, what is the engagement they have with you? Is there a certain program of a certain length? Are there multiple programs? How would you describe that?
Yeah, we have 3 tiers or 3 layers of the work. So again, what I found is that it tends to be that there's a journey we have to go through to be fully expressed, fully embodied, fully empowered, fully confident. And there's kind of milestones along that journey. So there's a moment where I just realize that there's something more. And when I'm at that moment, often folks are going to be meeting us like this on a podcast. Maybe they're going to be meeting us at an event. If I'm speaking or if I'm hosting something, I love to host dinners and kind of smaller gatherings. And it's like, something is missing or there's something I've left behind or somehow I can sense that there's more for me and I'm not quite sure what to do with it, or I just know that I'm kind of living split lives and the tension of that becomes too strong. So there's 3 different courses that we run. One is called Activate. It's a subset of our Guts and Grace methodology. It's basically a short course. You can do it in 8 days. You can do it over the course of 8 weeks. We run it inside of companies. We also offer it sometimes as either a self-study or a program that will run at a retreat or a live event. So we're doing, for example, in Costa Rica, we're bringing folks in with us to do the Activate methodology in a deep dive over 5 days. Our bread and butter, the main place that people work with me is inside of Guts and Grace, which is, I call it a coaching program, a coaching and mastermind program. Essentially, it's a combination of individual coaching, group coaching, and then 4 retreats over the course of a year, which is very similar actually to the structure of the company that I worked at initially when I kind of built my chops in coaching. So I've almost always been mostly coaching where there's a program and there's coaching happening at the same time. And then I do also offer executive level coaching. Sometimes there's a mastermind with that, or sometimes it's just solo if that's what somebody needs. So if they're already kind of at the level where they're disrupting their industries, leading really innovative businesses, often social impact businesses, folks will come to me and prefer perhaps to work one-on-one, or will primarily work one-on-one, and there'll be a little bit of a tie-in with some of my executive level clients.
And I guess depending on the program they go through as well, there's a certain program length that is needed for them to see meaningful change.
It's true. I mean, we've designed our programs to be, you can see change in that arena based on the length that we're offering. So in Activate, we specifically dial into one piece of unprogramming and reprogramming, if you will, that they need to do in both a mindset and embodied way to start seeing change. So in as little as a week, typically if I run it live, I run it over the course of like 7 weeks. So it could be 7 days or 7 weeks, but you'll see change. And you'll see change both in how they're behaving and what's coming back to them, how people are responding to them. Our Guts and Grace program is a year. And for someone to go through a meaningful kind of self-reinvention, professional reinvention, I would say it takes 6 months to 2.5 years. But really, a year to 2 years is kind of the sweet spot. Maybe a year to 18 months where you're actually going to see things are significantly different. I'm leveled up and fully comfortable in a role that's beyond what I was able to achieve before. Maybe I've actually fully changed my career, and that's part of what the change has been. You really can't rush that process. You can definitely create a meaningful change and expedite something in a certain way, but real change takes time. And it takes time for our bodies to catch up with the ideas of what we're
And generally, for the one listening, so let's say they're working in this company, they have reached that ceiling, just like you mentioned. What does then transformation look like in most cases? Is it them starting their own? If they had something on the side, would they actually be expanding on that, or it all depends on like the person?
It
I'm just
depends
thinking if
very
you
much.
see any patterns there.
There's definitely patterns, and it's also fairly custom. What I have majored in, I would say, in my career is not giving like, here's a cookie cutter way, or here's exactly the next 1, 2, 3. Now I have a methodology, but the methodology really supports people to create their own roadmap more than anything. That being said, some of the trends that I see are that when women of this particular build hit a ceiling, there can be a sense of like, I need to leave here. Either I need to quit working in corporate altogether and go start my own thing, or I need to leave this organization and find another one that's better for me in X, Y, and Z way. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. So I do what I call parallel track coaching, where we actually dial in on what is the transformation that needs to happen internally and what's the vision of how things will be and the sense of that in an embodied way. And then we really let walking the path dictate what the outcome is going to be. So I've coached people out of corporate into running their own business. I've coached people from running their own business back into corporate. I've coached people from one organization to another. I've also coached people who were 100% sure they needed to leave an organization. And through doing the work, they've gotten promoted several times and are maybe even now running the company. So it just really depends on this sense of alignment between where you're going and your trust that that may be possible. And then kind of getting out of the way of how whatever we say, right? The universe, whatever, wants to bring us that answer to that. And I think, in fact, the less sure you are about how it's going to look, the better.
I like that. So the less sure you're about how it's going to look like, the better. Oftentimes, how I perceive that is if you know what's it like going to be for you for the next 5 years, then you're probably walking into someone else's path, not your own path. And
Or
your
the
path,
path of your
which
old
is
programming.
yeah,
Or the path of your ego, old
yeah.
programming, someone else's path, former embodiment. What often happens, right, is if someone is sure this is what they need to do next or where they need to be next, there's some thread in that that's a replication of the pattern that got them in the situation they don't like in the first place. And if that actually doesn't get addressed, so it won't surprise anyone who's a coach, but if that doesn't actually get addressed, right, then in a way they're just going to be finding themselves in some period of time with that same pattern. So we go after the pattern and we really let the walking of the path dictate what may be possible.
Yeah, so it's generally okay not to know that next step, right? You'd say so?
And is my favorite word. Betsy and Grace. I would and. Most people I work with also have a hunch or a vision or something they've not been fully out about or haven't been fully honest with themselves about that tends to play a role when the whole thing plays out. So, for example, I work with someone who came in and she wasn't actually very hidden about it. She just didn't know what to do with it. So she's like, I feel like I'm supposed to help 1 million children. I'm like, that's cool. Like, you know, you're kind of a mid-level leader in a nonprofit that has nothing to do with kids right now. Like, but that was something that she was carrying, right? Fast forward 2 different jobs. She ends up, you know, getting her first CEO position in an educational organization and then eventually running a charter school system that's trying to expand across the country and probably will end up helping 1 million children. So we couldn't have foreseen that, right? But if she had just said, like, I'm going to try to make something happen and do that, it probably wouldn't have led her there. But there was a thread. And I think often people also have a thread.
Cool. And I want to dive into your thread as well. But before we get to that, this is a question that coaches who are listening are going to find interesting. And we also do need this for our research. When it comes to marketing, is there a certain marketing channel that you've seen working really well for you?
Mostly for me speaking. And I think it is probably because of the it depends factor of my work. I also blog. So I have found that writing regularly on topics that excite me and that are relevant to what's happening in the world tends to be good marketing for me. Then we tend to cut it up, repurpose it, put it in different places online. Often that's what people respond to. What I've found, and I don't think this could be a factor of not being great at certain kinds of marketing, or it could just be luck, or it could be many things. But mostly when I'm specifically trying to promote something, we don't see as much turnaround. But if I'm just sharing from my heart, if I'm putting out content that's embodied and emotional and connects with the audience in relation to what's happening in the collective at any given time, that tends to be where people lean in or where people want to hear more. And typically when I speak, people will follow up. So those have been the channels that have worked the best for us, as well as I happen to just love to host dinners. So leverage that as part of our strategy as well.
You did mention that too. So now going to like the thread that we mentioned earlier for you in this case, the future, do you have some sort of goals or maybe business goals or vision for the next 1 to 3 years with your coaching business with Guts and Grace?
We do. A little bit of backstory is I've been a small business, a couple of team members, founder-led, kind of founder-focused since 2014. And in the last year, some of my mentors and guides really have encouraged me to build a new leadership team. So I'm in the process of doing that right now, which means that rather than be kind of founder owned solely, we're now a collective, and well, ultimately a collective of 9 women. At the moment, we're 6. And so as part of that, well, let's say that I think serves as the foundation for kind of scaling that we're up to right now, which is intended to make the work more broadly available, both through an app, which we're working on developing right now, as well as through a more comprehensive live event series. Because the work that I do is embodied, the one-on-one work, the virtual work, all of this, we can actually take people pretty deep, surprisingly deep. But most of the transformation, or let's say the most exciting part of the transformation, tends to happen when we're live in a room. We're going to be opening up some of our quarterly Guts and Grace retreats, which have only been reserved for members, for cohort members, open them up to the public, and also producing more events like the one that we're doing in Costa Rica, in addition to live local events that are more like a half day in nature, with an intention of beginning to build more of a network across different industries of women who are in the same practice so that they can both collaborate together and frankly respond to the challenges we're looking at, especially in the US right now, in terms of innovation, responding to disruption, that sort of thing.
Cool. That is very specific. I like how specific it is and like how
We've been
detailed.
thinking about it for a little while, and it's been a path. I mean, if I tell you the truth, I've been in the process of scaling this business for probably 5 years, and I've tried a lot of different things on. And what's been getting dialed in the last, we talk about transformation in a year to 2 years, right? What's been getting dialed in the last year to 2 years is clarity about what our best moves are, where people get the most transformation from us, what that really needs to look like. I guess I didn't share this also. I have a new bench of coaches. So I'm not the only person doing coaching in my organization as of the last probably year and a half. And so we're really working on training the coaches, making the methodology more clear in terms of how to use it with our clients. Of course, they bring in each of them their own magic and have different styles, but there is a thread we're tracking that's a transformational journey we take our clients through. So in a way, I'm in this phase, kind of legacy, although I'm pretty young to be thinking about legacy, but like passing on or having the work get expanded for other people to be able to wield it eventually, as well as or better than I do.
So when you say, so you mentioned it's right now turning into a collective. It's already 6 women, right? In the collective, and then you have a team of coaches that you're training at the same time, but those are not the same as the women from the collective, right? They're not.
Some are actually. There's some overlap. So half of
Okay.
them are and half of them are not.
Oh, cool. So that makes sense then. Interesting. And right now, you're aiming to scale. And what would you say, like in terms of challenges, what is that one big challenge that you're trying to solve for next? Or where is the biggest challenge when it comes to scaling for you?
This is the $5 million question. What is the one thing that we need to solve for?
Or let's say what is the one thing that you're thinking of solving next instead of, because if you knew that one thing probably would be too easy.
Well, I mean, yeah, essentially it's lead gen, but the thing is we know the answer, which is I need to be speaking, 5 times a month rather than once a quarter because we know that that's part of what works from a lead gen perspective for us. We've just basically gone back to rebuild all of our infrastructure. So we're currently rebranding, we're currently rebuilding our website, we're currently rebuilding all of our marketing funnels because when we drive more traffic, but everything in the back end, some of you coaches may relate to this, things in the back end are kind of buttoned together, a little bit broken, like it's working, but not working that well. We've left a lot of money on the table from having faulty systems, not, ideal funnels and this kind of a thing. So it's been a couple of years of going inward and rebuilding foundations to be able to actually do more lead gen. And I've also been through cycles of doing a lot of lead gen and having a lot leak out because that wasn't solid. Because I'm not an operations gal at all. I'm much more of a be in relationship, be on a state, do the things that I love to do. And so the back end, the ops have gotten a little bit the short end of the stick in a certain period of our growth as a business. And that's what we've been doing to clean up on.
Cool. Cool. Well, I'm glad that there are all steps in the right direction. And so I wanted to ask you also, and this goes to the research again, when it comes to investments, obviously you've made a lot of investments. What have been some investments recent years that you feel really good about? Either you learned a lot or got a good return from. It could be investments of money and time or both. And what have been some investments that you would have preferred to have avoided if there's any bad
Yeah.
investment?
Well, I don't think there's any bad investment because we always learn from things. I can say that early on, the year that I started my own business and left the company I was working for, I started to study with Angelique Ruers, who is a person who basically teaches how to sell to corporate. That's a very probably not comprehensive summary of what she does or her business does. She now works under the brand Bold House. It was called The Corporate Agent when I started working with her. And what she was really all about, and I believe in ways continues to be, is just learning how to sell as a coach and not imagining that if you build a lot of marketing machines, it's suddenly going to bring back all this stuff and you're suddenly going to make $1 million. And I really owe, I think, a lot of the initial growth of my business to the mindset and the strategies that were taught in that container. I studied with them for 5 years, actually maybe 6 years, at least 6 years probably. And so that felt like a great investment. It was a coaching program. I was learning, I was developing practices and approaches that were about building a certain type of business. What it didn't help me do was anything around our brand. It didn't help me do anything around our visibility, certainly not selling on social media, any of those kinds of things. So then later I swung the other direction and began studying with folks who were teaching more of those tactics and strategies. I've done both. So part of our work has been now to put those things together. Those all felt like great investments at the time, and I wouldn't have kept making them if they didn't help us grow the business at that time. More recently, I would say I've invested in some pay-to-play stages, like pay to speak, some that have gone well, some that haven't gone as well. I think I didn't necessarily gauge the audience well enough or take full stock of, are these actually our people, or are we allowed to make offers in the way that we want to make offers before I said yes to the investment? And same thing with some marketing and PR support. I won't say there's ever a nightmare, right? But there've been a couple of folks where I was really impressed with what they were doing, but I missed my own spidey sense along the way that actually we weren't totally values aligned, or the strategy they were going to teach us wasn't something I'd ultimately want to do. And those ended up being quote unquote bad investments in the sense that we got partway through, a lot of time and money invested, and I didn't end up using the tactics because it came to actually doing them. I was like, that's not me. I can't do that. And because what I teach is embodiment and authenticity, but I couldn't fake it, right? And so I would say in terms of bad investments, those have been the things where I've had to actually kind of back up from and recover from.
Interesting. Basically, if you were to follow those strategies, it would mean that you would not be authentic anymore. And at that point, you're basically probably not even going to reach your target audience the same way.
That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah.
And it's all learning. I mean, I don't know that I could have known that without making that investment, going down that rabbit hole. So I don't regret it. I would say now if I'm coaching someone who's considering similar strategies, I'm going to ask them the kind of questions that are really like, all of us, I think, want to get ahead and to some extent will perform to the test to do that. My entire brand is around not doing that. And still, I've even done that myself, right? Or maybe I'm teaching it because it's my path to learn to unravel that in me. But I think if somebody's approach is exciting to you and that feels like it's going to make you more of yourself, awesome. Like invest with that person. And if it's not, there's probably going to be a moment where it either stops working or you wish you weren't doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely important to like make sure that you're still like your authentic self in the process. So my final question is when thinking about scaling, there's a lot of coaches that want to scale as well that are listening to this podcast. They want to scale because they want to make a bigger impact. For coaches who want to scale their impact, is there any advice you'd like to give to these coaches? And potentially could be an advice you give to yourself because you also want to do the same things.
Yeah, totally. Well, if I'm not thinking as much about myself, because I think I've been walking this path for a while, I would say learn to sell. There's a lot of folks that I meet who become coaches because they're so excited about coaching, but aren't into sales or just are kind of wishfully thinking or hoping that they won't have to do that part. Some people have managed to build businesses where someone else is doing that. But if you're starting out and it's the early stages, you'll have to be at least comfortable with it. I was really lucky. The company I worked for 10 years, like I built my chops in coaching. They also required that we sell if we wanted to coach. And so it wasn't like I had the choice that somebody else was doing all of the business development and I just got to coach. I actually had to do both. And then when I went out on my own, I was already somewhat good at that. I already knew how to I already knew how to do the mindset part of that work. I already knew how to do some of the technicalities of that work. It was totally different selling my own work versus the work for the company I work for. So there's a lot of learning still required, but I at least was warmed up to it. I think that really matters. And the second thing that I would give myself and anyone is kind of what I said, that at this point now, I don't believe that there's a path to scale that's not fully aligned with my build, what I care about, or who I am. No matter how good it looks on paper, no matter what somebody else is saying, this works for everyone, we have a proven formula, like this is the answer. If it's not you, at some point it will break. Or at some point you're going to get resentful. So it's kind of what I already said. That is really what I would offer to anyone. I actually had a coach recently. I'm not working with her anymore, but what I appreciated about her entire kind of manifesto was if you're going to build something that you want to grow, you have to build it in a way that's native and aligned to you. Otherwise, all the things will happen. So that's what I would.
For anyone who is listening and wants to connect with you or reach out to you, they can go into LinkedIn and look up LeeAnn Mallorie. They'll be able to find your profile. They can also go to the website, gutsandgrace.com, which we'll link also to the description.
And yeah, if you're looking for me online, Instagram, LeeAnn.Mallorie, LinkedIn, LeeAnn Mallorie. As long as you spell Mallorie with an IE at the end, you're going to find me. And if you spell it with a Y, you're going to find someone else who looks a little bit like me.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that detail. All right. And thank you so much for coming to the show today. It was lovely to have you on.
Thank you so much, Rexhen. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.